Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, as we begin 2020, I wanted to take a look at how snowfall that we've had so far this winter season has compared to an entire season's average. So that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at snowfall through the 1st of January 2020 compared to what we would get by the end of a normal winter season. And what I'm drawn to on this map is the locations that are in this part of the color range, specifically here in parts of the North Central Plains, specifically North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and also down here in the Southwest. We have lots of locations here that have been much, much snowier than a typical normal winter. So when you look at this map, again, the red colors represent where we still are below our season numbers. When you get up there in the blue colors, that represents snowier than normal conditions. So what do we have here? In parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota, some locations that have already seen 130% of a normal year's worth of snowfall. It's incredible to see that. Now, thinking about Southern California, take a look at this snapshot we got yesterday. This was on the 1st of January down here in the mountains in Southern California. So LA is sitting right into here. You can see the snowy peaks here just to the east and to the north of LA. And the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, I'll show it to you in a few minutes, is quite high for this time of year. You can also see some of the valley fog here. It's kind of a neat view to look down from space with some of our high-resolution satellites to see this stuff. But if you just take a look at snow depth, this is what the current chart looks like here across the United States. We can see that we have quite a bit of snowpack that is in our central and north central plains, stretching through the Great Lakes states and into the Northeast. But I was curious about this snowpack that you saw right here, because yesterday there was a lot of sunshine on the 1st of the year here. And take a look at this. As I press forward on this animation, you'll actually be able to see right in through here the snow melting under the heat of the sun yesterday. So we're working to erode some of that. And the big questions we have in this video, are we going to be putting more snowpack on this area in the near term? And what does our overall precipitation pattern look like coming up? Because when we think about temperatures, just take a look at how December finished. Now, we did have at times some pretty serious cold air outbreaks. But the heat we saw at the end of the month of December, especially in through this corridor, really brought the anomalies here for the whole month well above average. In some locations, 5 to 7 degrees above average. And there were just pockets here in the western part of the United States that were cooler than average. So this is how December 2019 is going to be remembered. It's also going to be remembered for its precipitation anomalies. So this is looking at the last 30 days in terms of total accumulated precipitation. And you can see down there in parts of the Mid-South, into the Ohio River Valley, and then in the southeast, we have several locations in here that for the month of December saw between 6 and 12 inches of rainfall. And if we just take a look at this compared to normal, this is what the last 30 days looks like in percent of normal. So for some folks down here, this is over 250% of normal precipitation, especially right into this corridor. This section was dry. And this section here was dry, and we had so much snow falling here in the north central plains. That's why they also look between 300 and 400% of average. So what changes are going to be made to these series of maps that I just showed you as we progress into the new year? Well, certainly parts of the southeast are going to get very wet. So here's your rapid recap. These are the main things that I'm going to be on the lookout for. Here in the southeast, not only in the next 7 days do we have a chance at picking up quite a bit of precipitation down here, but also in the following week as well. Meanwhile, the central part of the United States gets a break overall from the precipitation, while the Pacific Northwest gets some much needed rainfall and snowfall. So this is a very, very good thing here. But take a look at some of these rainfall totals we're anticipating just through the next week. So this gets you out to next Wednesday evening. You're seeing some locations here in parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee that may be getting another 2.5 to maybe over 4 inches of rainfall. And this has already started right down here today. So we have a very, very active pattern coming up, not only this week, but next week as well. In terms of snowfall, we're looking at an operational snowfall map from the European model. So this is an operational run. But we certainly see that over the next week, the potential for picking up quite a bit of snow in parts of the Northeast is a very real possibility. But also we can see coming back into parts of Michigan, northern Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, then getting back up here into parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, picking up some snow. Thankfully, not adding too much here to the Dakotas, but with the strong onshore flow we are getting in the Pacific Northwest, really packing up the snow here in the northern Rockies and in the Cascade Mountains, which is where we desperately need it. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is basin average snow water content. And if you look at those two mountain ranges, so specifically the Northern Rockies, which are here, and the Cascades, which are here, you can see that those are several locations where we are measuring below normal snow water content so far this year. All around it, all the numbers are above 100%, and as a consequence, we've got quite a bit of snowpack in the mountains outside of those regions, and this is critical for the moisture supply in this area come spring, so we're going to watch this throughout the rest of this winter. But as I said, not only is week 1 looking wet, but this is looking at week 2, and we have surprisingly good model agreement here. One of my colleagues, Dr. Ryan Maui, was talking about how when the Arctic is behaving the way it currently is, and I'll show you that in a few moments. He did some work which he published that said predictability tends to increase when that happens, and also model agreement tends to be good. And so I'm only showing the European ensemble, but this is only looking at week 2, getting us out to Friday the 17th. Look at how wet things are showing up here just in the week 2 precipitation anomalies. So we are nowhere near done with the wetter than average conditions over the southeast. And you can also see that while Northern California is staying a little bit on the drier side of things, the stronger onshore flow, as the flow splits around a big ridge out west, is keeping parts of the Pacific Northwest very, very wet. That's the bigger picture here when we take a look at precipitation. Now, what's causing this? Now, take a look, all right? In our last few videos this week and last week, we talked about this region right here developing a large ridge. Well, as a consequence of that, the flow is going to split. Look how fast it comes here off of Asia, and it splits right here around a ridge and dives into the western United States. The other piece of this, the subtropical branch, comes right down here and then screams from basically Hawaii clear to Maine. And that's the subtropical branch of the jet stream. Now, there's a few things that happen with this. The west tends to stay snowy and cool. Between this trough and the downstream ridge, it tends to be very active in terms of weather systems, but it also tends to be a mild pattern across much of the eastern half of the country. Same thing for Europe. This is going to be a very mild pattern for much of Europe, especially Eastern Europe and Western Russia. And remember, we're watching this area for snowfall because when this pattern breaks, and at some point in January it will break, we're going to go over to very cold air here, and that'll be critical to understanding what will happen to the winter wheat that's planted here. So this is it. This is what's controlling our pattern through the next at least 10 days. This will be the main look that we're going to be seeing here. What's helping this along? Well, I know I got 3 graphs kind of surrounding a map. The map, let's start there. The polar vortex over the next 10 days is expected to remain strong, sitting very much over the North Pole. And the stronger it is, the less likely we are to have major cold air, sustained cold air outbreaks hit anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. The Arctic Oscillation remains positive. We know that when it's positive, it's hard to get that cold air to really spill out of the northern latitudes. The North Atlantic Oscillation is positive. And for those of you watching this video on the East Coast, you know that if the North Atlantic Oscillation was way down here in negative territory, we'd have a big cool bias sitting in the eastern half of the country. And what's going on the west? Well, the Pacific North American pattern is negative, which means we're going to be favoring troughing in this area. So these things put together our overall picture. Combine that with what's going on in the tropics, with the Mad-Julian Oscillation racing out of null phase, coming over into phases 4, 5, and 6. Well, phase 5 is correlated with above average heights here and above average heights here and cold over Alaska. The flow is doing this. And that pattern is being supported in the tropics and in the extratropics and in the Arctic. So we've got some, what I feel like is a pretty reliable forecast moving forward. So what I'm about to play for you here is a 5-day sliding window of temperatures. And we're looking at differences from normal. And as I play this forward, we see that while we do bring in times where there's a quick shot at some cooler air, overall, when you blend together, looking out over the next 15 days, watch it again, we don't see that there's any sustained cold air outbreaks east of the Rocky Mountains. Okay, in the west, cool here. That's because that's where the trough is, where the really cold air is tucked away over the, the northern part of Canada, getting into the Arctic. Yes, very cold. In fact, take a look at this. This is for Alaska. This has been the longest stretch of cold days that they've had this entire last 12 months. It's incredible to see how warm Alaska was here. So this is a major pattern breakdown for Alaska, and we're seeing the effects of it here in the United States. So with our rapid update kind of out of the way here, let's get into some of the details. This is going to be a mainstay over the next 15 days. What is that? That is a flood watch. And I expect to see lots and lots of, in fact, I expect that to expand quite a bit in the coming days. And as we take a look at the current system that's pulling out right now, we can see that today we have a slight risk for some severe weather down in Louisiana and southern Mississippi. Primarily, this is going to be a strong wind with the possibility of tornadoes event, so not much hail. And then as this transitions to the east with time, this would be in the day on Friday over in this map, we can see that that marginal risk extends down there into parts of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So that's what we're watching as we transition toward the end of this week. Let's get right into it with some of our high-resolution modeling here. I stopped this mid-morning today, so you've already seen the precipitation spreading out ahead of the main frontal boundary here, pulling right out of the Gulf of Mexico into Louisiana. In fact, the mid-south getting into the southeast. So this is this afternoon, getting into this evening. So there's the main squall line of storms that could move through parts of Mississippi and Louisiana late this evening. As we transition into the overnight hours, so this is now getting into early Friday morning, this is about the time we wake up on Friday morning here, we can see that the main frontal boundary is still pushing through parts of Alabama, getting over to Georgia and the Carolinas here, with some rain still spreading through parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and now the system is pushing up here because it's so warm with rain into the Ohio River Valley and eventually into the Northeast. Now, while that's happening, some colder air is coming in behind this. So as I get you out to Friday evening, you can notice some light snow coming through the Dakotas, Minnesota, into northern Iowa, and eventually into Wisconsin and Illinois by the time I get into Friday evening. While that's all occurring, round 2 of the rainfall coming here Friday afternoon and evening through Saturday morning into the southeast. So this is just a very, very wet time period. While that's all occurring, the next big push of moisture, as you saw, came in here into the Pacific Northwest. And to see where all of this is going, let's switch over to the European model. So let's click play and pause it right about here. We've seen this far. This is Saturday morning. Now we let system number 1 move on out. And as it does so, let me step you back here. As it does so, you can see that we have the potential for some bigger snowfall amounts getting into Saturday night and Sunday morning here in the Northeast. Very strong winds around this system. And now this is what I want you to watch after this. We're going to see high pressure system after high pressure system form somewhere in this vicinity and move off the southeast coast. And each time it moves off the southeast, well, we know that the air flows clockwise around a high. So when it gets over here, it's going to basically pump more moisture in for the next system to emerge and use. Meanwhile, little clipper systems keep moving across the northern plains. So this is now, let's go to Sunday morning. There it is. Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening. So look at the little clipper that moved through here into the Great Lakes states, hitting Michigan here by the time we get into Sunday evening as our nor'easter moves on off the coast. Now look, see the high there? Watch this. As I play forward, where does that high go? Yep, right over here. As the next low pressure system forms and it pulls in that moisture, main frontal boundary kicks it up in the atmosphere, and here's our next round of precipitation Tuesday morning to Tuesday afternoon. Now, the little bit cooler air in place at this time period, our low pressure center sits here, and we can see we get some light snow on the back side of this. Very windy conditions for Tuesday right here in the Midwest. Look at the tight spacing of the isobars. Now, just to let you know, the GFS model doesn't quite have the same system with the same magnitude, in other words, same size in this area at this time. So the European is the snowier and the wetter overall model run for this coming Tuesday at this point. So again, this is January 7th. But we're going to watch this carefully for the blast at some cooler air temporarily and some very windy conditions with some snow. What does that system do? The same thing that the others do. They wrap out into the northeast here and bring in the potential for very windy conditions, some big time snow in the interior, And here's your next high. See it right there? Watch what it does. It moves off to the southeast. See it? Moves right over here. And guess what? That turns the pump right back on to bring the moisture back in for the next system that emerges by the time we get into next Friday. And so that is why we see such an active pattern here. It's the transition of these high pressure systems, the fact that the jet stream keeps sending troughs out of the desert southwest through the United States, and all that is, that's all in the split flow. So the northwest, you get it. The southwest generates the storm systems. The high pressure systems move off the southeast and pump the moisture back in. And we put all that together, things look very, very wet. So through the next 10 days, European model on the right, GFS ensemble on the left here. And look, they're both painting the Pacific Northwest wet. Northern California, in fact, much of California, slightly drier than average. Where's the main activity? Right in through there. And that is your story. That's what we're dealing with as we work our way to the middle of the month of January. Quickly, what's going on elsewhere around the world? Well, with the Indian Ocean dipole finally letting go, the Mad-Julian oscillation is taking over. And it is sending, as you can see here, its descending motion in the atmosphere over the next 15 days over towards South America. Now, in the near term, ascending motion is in place, which is why we see through week 1 wetter than average conditions here, while it's drier in Brazil's southern growing regions, Paraguay, Uruguay, and northern Argentina. But look at week 2. This is when we get the suppressing motion in the mid part of the continent, and now things dry out here from Mato Grosso do Sul over toward Minas Gerais, Bahia, Goiás, Tocantins, this area. While it gets wet down here in southern Brazil and also in Argentina. So major differences between week 1 and week 2. Again, almost entirely driven right now by the Mad-Julian oscillation. And I think what I'll finish with is what I think a lot of you have been seeing in the news. It has to deal with the fires continuing to go on down here in the southeastern part of Australia. And I'm showing you this snapshot. This was early this morning on the 2nd, taken by MODIS satellite on the platform called Aqua. And you can see that the smoke extends. It's such a great deal away from the coast. In fact, it was covering parts of New Zealand. And we saw this video posted yesterday, widely shared with us here, showing you what some of the smoke looks like on the Tasman Glacier in New Zealand. Just incredible to see that. So these are from the fires in Australia. And as we take one last look at things, the Bureau of Meteorology posted this. 2019 is currently the warmest on record for Australia, and it is also the driest. And you can see what some of these longer term trends look like in terms of temperature and precipitation. So with that, which is kind of a sad note here, I'll go ahead and finish things up. I hope that you all have a great start to 2020. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you.